Hello, this is Abnormal Psychology, and today we're talking about specific phobia. And I have for you a Maury Povich show excerpt from a young woman who is phobic of pickles. She also happens to be a waitress. Now, the first thing I want to tell you is although you may be tempted to laugh along with the audience, what Maury Povich is doing in this show is abusive. Not only is it not helping, it's probably making things worse. I want you to see things from her perspective. Okay? All right. So what we want to think about is that phobia is derived from the Greek word for fear, and it refers to a persistent and unusually high amount of fear for particular objects, activities, or situations. And phobic avoidance is what virtually all people do when they have a phobia. Who would want to be around the thing that causes them lots of anxiety? They avoid it. Okay? They try to avoid the thoughts about it too. They don't want people talking about it. Now, this fear is marked fear, so it's significant enough that it's uncomfortable for the person. And that thing, that situation or that object, is almost always one that provokes the fear in that person. And they, in addition to avoiding it, also realize that the fear is unreasonable, that there's no real danger associated with this, although some people may imagine and somehow come up with odd statistics, like people who are afraid of flying may tell you that every once in a while a plane crashes, but in fact flying is safer than driving a car by far. Again, that 6-month window is required, and it does involve distress and impairment when the avoidance of these objects or situations interferes. So what usually happens is people with phobias don't test that fear, so the fear persists in them for those things. But if they're able to successfully avoid it, it doesn't impair very much. Okay, it would only impair, for example, if you were afraid of elevators and you had a job that was on the 96th floor of a building. That would be impairing because you need an extra 45 minutes to get up the stairs or so. Yeah. Okay. So 7 to 9% in the population. If you talk about loosening up the definition just a little bit, you can get numbers as high as 40%. It's higher in teenagers, about double that, 7 to 9%. Females twice as often as males, but only with respect to animal, natural environment, and situation-specific phobias. Others are equally experienced. Slightly lower overall in Asian, African, and Latin American countries. Many people have more than one phobia. You can have a phobia for rats, mice, snakes, and spiders, for example. Most people don't ever get treatment for their phobia. They simply avoid it. They can, in some cases, be around the thing that they're afraid of, but they endure it with tremendous anxiety. And they may even have a panic attack if the anxiety is high enough. Doesn't qualify for panic disorder though. Okay. All right. So let's talk about specific types. There's the animal type, and this is like snakes and spiders. Natural environment type would be heights and storms, and I'm giving you the most common ones. Blood injection injury type would be seeing blood, getting a shot, watching surgery of oneself or others. Sometimes it's a difference there. The situation type, enclosed spaces, bridges, tunnels, things like that. And there's a collection of other, like vomiting, loud sounds, clowns, and a million other things. For which there are a gazillion names, by the way. Okay. So in the general population, you will see numbers ranging from the low numbers in the single digits in the general population, as I said, all the way up to 40. And it really depends on the study that you're looking at. So some studies will settle in on 12%. I think it's hard to gather data about this. That's what I think. All right. Among the most common, probably the most common phobia is a fear of animals, certain animals anyway. Heights would come in second, and blood would come in third, enclosed spaces would come in fourth, flying fifth, and so on. Now that's also regional. So in tornado-stricken areas, the phobias for storms, particularly tornadoes, would be much higher than other places. Okay, so let's see here. The fear of clowns is an interesting one to talk about briefly. It's called coulrophobia. And in some places, particularly in Europe, England, for example, where small traveling circuses make their way around the country on a regular basis, and many people go to see them as a relatively inexpensive form of entertainment. You have little kids who are scared by clowns, who are often ghoulish in nature or provocative in some way in terms of approaching you. And that sticks with them and develops into a phobia. So we could talk about any one of a number of various kinds of phobias. I mean, we could talk about ants, becoming bald, heights, marriage, cats, water, spiders, even kissing. I have treated 2 people with kissing phobias, believe it or not. And I think there was an overlap in some ways to some OCD obsessions at any rate. In one case, in another, it developed, I think, more as a result of fears of intimacy in general. Okay. But if you look through on your PowerPoint, I have many slides with all sorts of different through the alphabet examples of phobias. Everything, you name it, there's a phobia. Fear of streets, fear of men, fear of women, fear of beautiful women, fear of toilets, fear of freedom, fear of forests. The list goes on and on and on. Now, what I want to talk to you about is that phobias are thought through the idea of preparedness theory to be a way in which our forebears, our earliest primitive humans and before, to avoid injury, an injury at one point, not that long ago, it was a few hundred years ago, could mean death. You break a leg, if it's a compound fracture, you get infected, you're going to die. The first antibiotic was offered in 1943, penicillin, just in time to treat war wounds, infections and war wounds. Okay. Well, so what's important about this? Well, if you naturally fear spiders, heights, separation, darkness, and storms and strangers, you have an advantage. You have an advantage over those who don't automatically fear those things. For people that go, hey, I think I'll pick up this snake. So that's more likely to bring death. So any advantage that you got through evolution that wired you up to be naturally afraid of things that could hurt you or kill you, that's a big advantage in terms of getting your genes into the next generation. In other words, survival. And this preparedness theory that I mentioned has to do with the biological preparedness through evolution to develop phobias. You're prepared, at least, to develop phobias as a human. Although I can tell you that other animals develop phobias too. Dogs come to mind. I've had dogs that are phobic of snakes once they got one that got bitten by a snake. Anything that even looked like a snake that wasn't even a snake, the dog would run from. But this explains why, this preparedness theory, why things like snakes and heights are more common as phobias than, say, grass or meat, you see. The preparedness theory. It makes some sense, doesn't it? Okay. There are a number of ways that we respond to immediate danger that we perceive. It's not just fight or flee. We could also freeze. Children will often freeze in the face of danger. You could also submit. So sometimes in the face of great danger, people just capitulate to that fear. And then there is an idea associated with that, because if you submit, then the idea would be that the perpetrator, whether it's an animal or a person or whatever it is, the inducer of the fear would be less aggressive. Okay? And then another response to immediate fear could be sleeping or fainting. You see, so broaden our ideas about what sometimes happens in the face of danger. Now, there are developmentally normal fears. Okay, so up to about 6 months, loud noises, rapid position changes, approaching objects that are large and moving quickly. And then from 6 to 12 months, there's strangers, looming objects, unexpected objects, unfamiliar people. 1 to 5 years, another a bit wider range. Strangers, storms, animals, dark, separation, from parents, objects, loud noises, toilets. 6 to 12-year-olds, a school-age kid, supernatural. They begin to imagine that realm. And then body injury in themselves and others, particularly family. Disease, burglars, failure, criticism, punishment. And then teenage years, 12 to 18, performance, peer scrutiny and evaluation, appearance, performance. Those are all normal fears according to age stages. Okay. Now, where do phobias come from? One is through conditioning. And once you acquire a fear, you continue to fear the object because you avoid it. You don't approach it. And that's one way. A cognitive explanation would be you tell yourselves things like you're stuck in an elevator, I might die. Then you have a fear of elevators. Then you generalize that to fear of confined situations, which then generates what we call claustrophobia. Okay. We might see other people afraid of things, and that's called modeling as an explanation for the development of phobias. Okay? Now, people with low vulnerability to stress and anxiety and the development of anxiety disorders in general can cope with a lot of stress without developing anxiety disorders. So they can function okay with environmental stress at a relatively higher level. People with medium vulnerability will cope with moderate stress but become ill at increasing levels beyond a modicum of stress. Persons with high vulnerability don't require very much environmental stress at all before they decompensate. Okay? All right. Now, we treat this with cognitive behavior therapy and, only if necessary, medication, which would be even things that are not, particularly things that are not addictive. So I'll talk to you next time. Bye.